Man, oh man, oh man. The Edmonton Oilers fall short. The Florida Panthers just won their first Stanley Cup in franchise history, which is nuts, honestly. I don't have too many takes that I don't think a lot of other people won't have in regards to, like, what about the Panthers, what about the Oilers, or anything like that. Not to bury the lead on the Panthers winning the Cup before the Oilers, of all people, and shout out to Cynical for the 16 months, of all people who had a great point, it was my wife, who is an incredibly casual hockey fan because of me. She mentioned the fact that for the Oilers, it has to suck a little bit less to lose in Game 7 than it does to get swept. If you get swept, those doubts start to creep in about how close are you actually, how good are you actually, and some teams that breaks them, other teams it makes them. It made the Florida Panthers last year. I presume it'll make the Oilers as well. But yeah, just the fact, like, obviously it's still going to suck. Like, Jesus, we could have won that, is going to be their feeling. And yeah, they could have. That's a hell of a lot better than, like, oh man, we weren't good enough. JJ Redick doesn't give a fuck. Should be allowed to play. I mean, yeah, players should be allowed. God damn it. It was 11 p.m. Eastern. Let players swear during the Cup celebration without cutting out the audio for 30 seconds. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. It's weird, right? It's really weird for the Oilers, and I think it's kind of summed up perfectly by the, I don't even know what the hell I want to do with this menu. We can go to the talking screen. I think it's kind of summed up perfectly by the fact that Connor McDavid still won the Conn Smythe, which, had they lost Game 5 and the series ended in a gentleman's sweep, I don't think people would have complained about Connor McDavid winning the Conn Smythe. But because he didn't really do much on the score sheet, to put it lightly, for Game 6 and Game 7, now all of a sudden people have a big problem with it. He deserved the Conn Smythe. He did. It's not a rule, obviously, that whoever, the Conn Smythe winner is has to be from the winning team, and this is why. Connor McDavid, granted, ran out of steam at the end, but that's also, I mean, Jesus, Game 7, he played half the goddamn game. And that's because the Oilers lack of depth. But Connor McDavid deserved the Conn Smythe, and he is hardly the first superstar to lose in the Stanley Cup final in their first attempt. Sidney Crosby did not win his first Stanley Cup final. Wayne Gretzky did not win his first Stanley Cup final. It very much happens. Now, people are obviously joking, like, oh, is Connor McDavid, is he eventually going to win a Stanley Cup? Probably, but is it going to be in Edmonton? And we don't know yet, right? We have no idea. But he absolutely deserved the Conn Smythe, How many finals has Perry been a part of? He's lost like 4 of the last 5, which is nuts. So, yeah, like I said, I don't think Sasha Barkov cares all that much about not getting the Conn Smythe. To anybody saying Bobrovsky, I don't think you can give it to Sergei Bobrovsky, okay? He was phenomenal in Game 7. But, woof, Games 4, 5, and 6, That lost Bobrovsky the Conn Smythe. It was going to be Barkov or McDavid. It was rightfully Connor McDavid. Not everything needs to be a controversy or anything like that, right? Not everything needs to be. In regards to McDavid not accepting the Conn Smythe, I presume he just wasn't in the mood. You never know. The attitude could have been like, hey, it's not my time to be on the ice. I fucking just lost the Stanley Cup. I don't view that as him being, okay, there you go. T-Reds is one of those people that has that opinion. I don't view it as him being classless. I view it as him just being like, I lost. I'm not trying to take any spotlight right now. That's how I view it. Might be wrong. I don't know. People are going to view it how they want to view it. But if Florida had swept Bob, Bob would have won the Conn Smythe. Potentially. Wonder if NJ was in the mood. Hey, yes, T-Reds, give an example from 40 years ago. Because everything about sports exactly the same as they were 40 years ago. I don't think that's your best example, bud. But good try. Warrior, thank you for the 70 months, by the way. So for the Oilers, We'll see what the hell happens, right? For the Panthers, number one, the Paul Maurice. I don't think it's a lack of sportsmanship, but I'm also not going to argue with you because I'm not going to change your opinion. You're not going to change my opinion. There you go. The Paul Maurice Cup raise. The only one. There have been some great goddamn Stanley Cup raises. And Herd with the 5 gift. Thank you very much, Herd. I just realized I don't have the alerts. Even though they're supposed to. Here, let me do this real quick. Let me do this really quickly. There you go. I don't know why that wasn't there before.
Taste the goodness of the biscuit.
There's a lot of initial cup raises that come to mind for the best of all time. I am biased in that Ray Bourque will still be my favorite of all time. There are some people where it's like, yep, I think it's Rod Brindamore or whatever. Man, does that Paul Maurice Cup raise have a legitimate shout to be like the best ever. That was fantastic. To get interrupted mid-interview like that was sick. To see Luongo with the Stanley Cup finally, a lot of people are like, oh, 2011, aren't you? Yeah, you're probably upset about Luongo finally getting a cup. No. I've said it a million times. If it was anybody else other than the Boston Bruins against the Vancouver Canucks in 2011, I would have been rooting for Vancouver. That's just how it is. And then obviously, it's interesting because this Panthers team, I hadn't just been following closely as a Bruins fan because they've been kicking the shit out of my favorite team in the playoffs. I told the story recently on the podcast, or at least the podcast feeds, in regards to like, hey, the history of the podcast, stuff like that. And obviously my old co-host Deej, who is the most diehard Florida Panthers fan I've ever known. And despite us not having a friendship anymore, I'm incredibly happy for him. And when he was on the show, we were talking about, on a near daily basis, how the Panthers were building up this team, how Bill Zito was knocking it out of the park with the way they were building up that roster. And damn. Just damn. To see those pieces get put into place and then Bill Zito just being like, fuck it, I'm going to trade Jonathan Huberdeau. And it's just crazy. He is arguably the best GM in the league. Obviously, right now you can say he is the best because his team just won the Stanley Cup. But just damn. Just damn. They're a hell of a team. They are a hell of a team. For Sergei Bobrovsky, this seals the fact that he will be a Hockey Hall of Famer. He is still one of the most bizarre goaltenders, I think, in league history. For someone who 1 second can be an unbeatable brick wall and the next second can let in, 5 goals on 16 shots? But yeah, he is going to be a Hockey Hall of Famer. Are the Panthers the best ran team this decade? That would still be the Tampa Bay Lightning. That would very much still be the Tampa Bay Lightning until we get a little bit further into the 2020s, at the very least, given the fact that they have made 4 Stanley Cup finals in the last 10 years. Lost in 2015, won in 2020 and 2021, lost in 2022 to Colorado. It's still Tampa for now. Like I said, man, there's so many different little aspects and stories about the Oilers, about the Panthers, but it is just really cool to see a franchise get their first ever cup win. Not that I would have been upset about seeing Edmonton win it either, but yeah, I don't know, man. Crazy. It's crazy, crazy, crazy is all I can say. McDavid doesn't win a cup. Could he still go down as top 5 ever? Yes. Yes, because now what's interesting is that the NBA, and this was actually something else Deej and I talked about a couple of years ago, the NBA is so intrinsically tied now and has been over the last 25 years or so. It already was, but it's only been amplified more with what people call ring culture, as in you can't be considered one of the best unless you have championships, not even championship. The NHL hasn't always been that way, at least to the same extent. It's certainly still continuing to drift in that direction. I think we saw that with Ovechkin in the mid-2010s when people were like, oh yeah, but he doesn't have a cup. As if he isn't going to go down as a Hockey Hall of Famer and still potentially beat Wayne Gretzky's record, even if he doesn't win that Stanley Cup with the Caps in 2018. So, Connor McDavid could retire tonight, and that guy's still a Hockey Hall of Famer. So did you hear about the big Boston trade today? Well, fun fact, I was going to talk about that next. Stay tuned for a second. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. In fairness, I should talk about it now because I don't think I have too much else to add in regards to the Stanley Cup final, other than I am just very, very happy for Panthers fans and one Panther fan in particular, because that organization did what Arizona was unable to do. They are two sides of the same coin. The Arizona side is the side where ownership could never get their shit together, could never put the pieces together, and now look at the outcome. They lost the team after years of people saying move the team. The Florida Panthers side of things, the complete opposite. They were able to get stable ownership. They were able to put that team together, and they were able to shrug off, for the vast majority of my lifetime, people saying move that team. Do not let anybody tell you otherwise, that people were not shitting on the Florida Panthers just as much as the Arizona Coyotes about relocate that team to Winnipeg, because they absolutely did. And even if you want to say, oh, well, their attendance in the regular season still isn't great. Dude, that building was packed, and let's not act like it was only packed because of the away fans, especially in Game 7 for the Oilers. But that stadium was packed for every playoff game. They were there for it. There is a diehard fan base for that team. And now they finally get to tell people to go fuck themselves because that team's not going anywhere. That team, I am sorry, Quebec. You better start rooting for expansion because relocation's not happening, especially with the Florida Panthers at this stage. So in regards to the Boston Bruins, national anthem was nice and a lot of great energy from the start. Dude, okay, so for Game 7 in general, that game was fucking awesome. I feel like even though there were only 3 goals combined, that is a game, an entire broadcast that you could show somebody who does not know hockey, and that might just win them over. The atmosphere was awesome. The game, yes, a bit more defensive and gritty, especially down the stretch in the third period, but it was a hell of a hockey game. And it's nice for the NHL to be able to end their season on a high note because, as I mentioned on Twitter a couple of times, man, we went from this being the worst Stanley Cup final ever, which is what people were saying heading into Game 4. Don't let revisionist history fool you on that either. That is what people were saying. They were all labeling it, ESPN, Sportsnet, TSN, whatever, the worst final ever. Is this the worst final ever? And no, by the end of it, it wasn't. But that's kind of the point. Like, the NHL needed this win. The final looked like it was going to be over in 4 or 5 tops. And so much of the talking points this season were negative, which made it kind of difficult to be a hockey fan in some ways. So much of it was about the officiating being fucking terrible, the DOPS somehow being worse than the officiating, the fallout of the Hockey Canada investigation that is still ongoing, resulting in multiple NHL players being suspended. The NHL took some fat fucking L's this year. They needed this Game 7 to be on point, and it was. It was a great, great game. Keep hearing him something about why the fourth line is important. Yeah, Crash kind of nailed it. Hockey, especially, you need a super well-balanced team. Not that you don't need a strong bench in the NBA, but, for the NBA, there's only 5 players on the ice at a time, and most times, in the NBA, on the court, that is, and you, I have 8 or 9 players tops play the entire game. Hockey-wise, yeah, you can't have somebody play the entire goddamn game. Like LeBron's done in the past in the playoffs, so on and so forth. But, yeah. So credit to the Florida Panthers. Nothing but respect. The Bruins trade that happened today, I also wanted to talk about really quickly. Somewhat quickly. And I highly doubt that this was missed by anybody. I loaded up Cap Friendly out of routine. And for old time's sakes, let's just stick with it before switching over to Puckpedia full time. There have been some trades in the NHL because this season, let me just make sure this is working properly. Good, it is. Because this season has gone on forever and fucking ever. Can we please not have like 8 preseason games and have the Stanley Cup be decided on June 24th? Thank you. But obviously there have been a couple of trades involving goalies over the past week, right? You got Jacob Markstrom going to New Jersey for Kevin Ball and a first. And that was kind of the deal that, for a lot of people, set the tone about what a trade for a big-time goalie is going to look like. You get the Kemper-Dubois swap, which is just weird in the first place, right? Then today, Linus Ullmark to Boston for Korpisalo-Kastelik and a first-round pick, which coincidentally was Boston's first-round pick anyway, that originally belonged to, or I guess you could say originally belonged to Detroit in the Bertuzzi trade. So from Boston to Detroit, Detroit to Ottawa, then back to Boston. And a lot of people are looking at this return as like, oh my God, it's god-awful for the Bruins. It might be, but again, I am not somebody that has the energy to be like, oh yeah, something happened. It's the best thing ever. It's the worst thing ever. If you guys have been watching me for long enough, you'll know that that's never my opinion on these things, especially if it's a trade that involves a draft pick, let alone a first-round pick. You know, when you look at the Markstrom deal, there is a very good chance he was, you know, going to be holding up Dustin Wolf. It was best for Calgary to move on from him, let Dustin Wolf take over. New Jersey desperately needed a goalie. They give up a roster defenseman in Kevin Ball and a first-round pick that's top 10 protected. We'll see what happens there in the future. But obviously, this is good for the Devils. It's good for the Flames. The Caps-Kings trade. It's good for the Kings to get rid of that PLD contract. It's good for the Caps to get rid of the Darcy Kemper contract, especially, you know, you have Charlie Lindgren in the system, who was pretty good last year, and then, you know, granted he hasn't made a full-time effort, but someone like Hunter Shepard's been a phenomenal AHL level goalie. Maybe he gets a chance. The Caps are on the way down. They've been on the way down. The only really interesting thing about their team right now is trying to see if Ovi can break the record before the wheels fall off. This trade, I understand that the Markstrom deal may have set the bar a little bit high, and the main contingent that people have on this, or the holding point, whatever the hell you want to say, I can't think of the correct terminology right now, is the fact that, you know, it's the Korpisalo contract and the Sens only retain 25%. I'll get to that. For Ottawa, it made sense to get rid of that Korpisalo contract because it simply wasn't working out there. You needed a goalie that you could rely upon, and for that price, it was worth paying that for Linus Ullmark, who, even at a base level, if you, again, there's more than just save percentages. Linus Ullmark has been a very, very strong and consistent goaltender for the past 5 seasons now, if not a little bit more, because obviously you have to look at some of these seasons with the Sabres and say he wasn't on a very good hockey team. Very Antti Ranta-esque in that he was putting up good numbers on a bad team. You know, you can debate how successful Ranta's been on Carolina. But obviously, Ullmark won a Vezina trophy last year. So, for its base level, it's a good deal for the Senators to get somebody that, in theory, they can rely upon a little bit more. For the Bruins, you were never going to keep Linus Ullmark long-term. You just weren't. The guy is getting paid $5 million now. His contract's up at the end of next year. Your choice was to keep the Swayman-Ullmark tandem together for 1 more year and then see Ullmark walk, or you get something for Ullmark now. You could argue, oh, well, losing him for nothing would have been better than getting this return. I disagree, and allow me to mention as to why. First and foremost, Jeremy Swayman is an RFA and still has to be signed. He's the guy. There is no need for an outright tandem anymore. Linus Ullmark would have been securely in the backup role. Not a good situation for Ullmark necessarily, especially heading into a contract year. You can imagine he wants to be the guy to prove that the Senators or somebody else next year should be the team to back up the Brinks truck and pay him the biggest contract of his career. When it comes to the Bruins, they had a choice. It's a team that has a lot of cap space right now, right? $21 million. They had a choice of first-round pick or a little bit more cap space. They chose the first-round pick over the cap space, and I don't think that's the wrong way to go about it. You could have gone with Brandon Bussey, tremendous name. You could have gone with Michael DiPietro or some veteran for dirt cheap. But at the end of the day, this was likely their only way to get a first-round pick. Not only had the goalie market dried up when it comes to potentially getting rid of Linus Ullmark, Linus Ullmark also still had a no-trade clause, which, as you might remember, they tried to trade him at the deadline, and he said no and nixed a deal that was rumored to be to Los Angeles, potentially for Pierre-Luc Dubois. So thank you for that, Linus Ullmark, but at the same time, it shows that, at least in my opinion, and I have been very critical of Don Sweeney and Bruins management at times, and rightfully so, I don't think this is one of the times to be like, oh, they got fleeced, or oh, that's all you got. I think that's all you could get. And I wouldn't be surprised if Ottawa was really the only team out there right now that was willing to give up, a first-round pick for a goalie. Because there are other teams out there that still have to try to figure things out. Like Nashville's a great example. Are they going to keep UC Saros? Are you going to pay UC Saros? His deal's up at the end of next year. They have a Skarov in the system. For the Bruins, at the very least, you no longer have goalie concerns outright, aside from outright signing Jeremy Swayman. So I think for that reason, it's a positive. You get a first-round pick in a very deep draft. I posted this up on Twitter earlier where someone's like, oh, 25th overall pick, 25th round even. 25th overall pick, it doesn't matter if that's a first round, a second round, it doesn't move the needle. David Pastrnak was a 25th overall pick in his draft year. Shea Theodore was a 26th overall pick. God forbid we get into who the hell a 7th round pick was. You can't properly judge this trade for at least 5 years from now because we don't know who this pick is going to be and what they could be. This is, in 2024, a particularly strong draft class, and a lot of people are like, oh, but there's a drop-off. Dude, players slip every year, and in particularly deep draft classes, you often get players that would have been higher up that are bumped down, and those guys typically would have been higher up. Meaning that, yeah, in a deep draft class, you can get a damn good player, 25th overall, 37th overall, whatever. Not to mention, like I said, players slip. The Russian factor certainly benefited the Philadelphia Flyers, hasn't it? As they're about to bring over Matvei Michkov. So the idea that this pick isn't even that valuable to an organization that has arguably the weakest prospect pool in the NHL right now, granted, that is because they have been competitive for year after year, and that's bound to happen, that pick means a hell of a lot to the Boston Bruins. It means more than having an extra $2 million in cap space. It absolutely does. And if you don't believe me over the, the Bruins reserve list, when some of your top unsigned prospects currently include, there's barely a name on there to be like, yes, that guy, pay attention to that guy, let alone some of the younger guys that they have signed. Like, unless you still consider Lorei a prospect, like Fabian Lysell is still their best forward prospects. Like, it's a weak prospect pool at this stage. On top of that, they get Mark Kastelich, who I like quite a bit as a fourth liner. Physical, hits, pretty damn good on the draw. He's big, like he fits that Bruins aesthetic fucking perfectly. And he's a former member of the Calgary Hitmen, so I'll love him for that reason. That's a good pickup. That's a good, dirt cheap pickup. His contract's up at the end of next year, but that's a really good piece. Obviously, again, the biggest thing about this is Jonas Korpisalo. $3 million for 4 years, right? And we buried the lead on this, but for good reason. I agree that the term is concerning. The $3 million, again, if you had gone with like Brandon Bussey or whatever, like, okay, you would have saved some money. They still had plenty of money to spend at the moment. I don't think that's a make or break situation. If you had gone with a veteran, which, by the way, when people are like, oh, go for a veteran goalie. I don't know if people are aware that this upcoming free agency period, it's not the best. Upcoming free agent goalies, go off of games played here or not, because it reset from goalies. Never mind. It's good the Cap Friendly got bought by Washington. Terrible website. Sort by games played, please. Cam Talbot. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's an RFA. And actually, here, let's sort this by... let's sort this by... Where the hell is my... There we go. Expiry status is what I wanted, not signing status.
Okay, but what? Here comes
you look at UFAs. Cam Talbot. Ilya Samsonov. Kaapo Kakkonen. Scott Wedgwood. Casey DeSmith. Like Anthony Stolarz, maybe. There aren't that many goalies that are that much more dependable, right? Like, you could argue, like, okay, Brassois, you probably would have had to pay him $2 million. Stolarz, $2 million. Again, I think that kind of proves my point. There's not a whole hell of a lot out there that's viewed as reliable. What they're banking on is Joonas Korpisalo playing on the best team he's ever played on and recapturing some of his previous form. There's no denying, even at a base level, again, save percentages and everything, last year in Ottawa, he fucking sucked. Coincidentally, the Ottawa Senators also sucked. He played the majority of his career on the Columbus Blue Jackets, had some good years, had some not so good years, right? As it turns out, the Columbus Blue Jackets are also incredibly inconsistent. And for his one season in Los Angeles, granted in the playoffs, not great, those 11 games in LA, he played really well. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not saying that this is the smartest move, but you can clearly tell what they're banking on. They're banking on Joonas Korpisalo being the solid backup for Jeremy Swayman to play 30 games or so this upcoming season. That way Swayman doesn't get UC Saros and plays 60 games and is dead by the playoffs. They're banking on Korpisalo finding that form, being locked down under contract, right? Because if this works out for them with Korpisalo, they will have him signed pretty much in tandem with Jeremy Swayman, depending on what Swayman signs for, right? Again, it's not the craziest, like, most beneficial deal in the world, but I also don't think you can inherently call it an anchor or an albatross. Now, in the past, I've said, hey, good goalies can still do well on bad teams. And again, Korpisalo was very inconsistent. But if we're going to give that excuse to, like, John Gibson in Anaheim for a decade almost, I don't see why Joonas Korpisalo can't be given the benefit of the doubt to say, hey, he might actually be really solid. And if it works out, fantastic. If it doesn't, yikes. But again, this was the key. That first-round pick is what they wanted. It seems like this was the only way they were going to get it. They viewed it as worth the risk. We'll see how it pans out. For Ottawa, it's pretty simple. You got an improvement in goaltending. You are going to have to sign him to a long-term deal, and that's another factor. Ottawa apparently didn't want to pull the trigger on the deal without having a long-term deal in place, so I imagine that's going to be signed soon. Start a free agency, whatever. But at the end of the day, God, imagine if they didn't. Who knows? No offense to Sens fans, but it's the Ottawa Senators. If Ullmark somehow walks at the end of next year, would anybody be surprised? I don't think it'll happen, but that's my point. You never know about trades like this. So at its base value, the Sens get rid of a contract they didn't need, get a goalie that they did. The Bruins get a goalie, but most importantly, they get that first-round pick that they really desperately needed. And like I said, you never know what the hell that first-round pick's going to be. So in terms of who won this trade, who lost this trade, at face value, it looks good for both teams. Talk to me in 5 years, and I'll let you know who won this deal. Legit, if you go back, let's do it. Let's go back to June of 2019. 5 years ago, if it'll let me. I should probably go from this side. That's what happens. I get so amped up to prove one of my points. Let's just... Oh, my God. Cap-friendly. Die already. You're terrible. There you go. Give me that deal there. Actually, hold on. Let's. This is a better way to do this. I'm struggling. I'm a professional. I'm struggling. Also, it doesn't help that the autofill dates are still there, and I hate it. Everything's fine. Don't worry. Bear with me. Beautiful. So, let's look. Right? Let's go all the way back. Oh, God. I can't go in reverse order. I thought I could go in reverse order. Let's just go back to this button here. I tried to prove a point a certain way. I couldn't do it. For example, Chicago acquiring Andrew Shaw for multiple picks. At the time, you had opinions. Oh, terrible deal. Great deal. you can look at it now and be like, didn't really work out for either side, right? Florida picking up Scott Darling for a 6th. I mean, as the voice is given out. The Galchenyuk for Phil Kessel trade. You can go back and look at the vast majority of these deals and be like, okay, who did it work out for? Who didn't it work out for? Was it worth it for Vegas to trade Eric Holla to Carolina? Eric Holla? You're getting rid of this guy? 55 points in 2017-18, injury troubles, and oh man, you're not even going to give him another chance? Well, they got Nick Waugh, and they won a Stanley Cup with Nick Waugh. Seemed to work out pretty damn well. Again, you can go through so many of these deals and whether or not it worked out or not, what opinions were at the time. And again, there's a lovely feature on Cap Friendly. Use it while you can. Next to the date, there's the option to discuss this trade, and you can get opinions from the Cap Friendly community, fair deal or who won it. And all of those opinions are there as to who won those deals. And you can go back in time and say, oh shit, now they were right. Or, oh shit, wow, people were really wrong. Because that's how fucking hockey works. So again, it's boring for me, but at a base value, base opinion, it's a solid enough deal for both teams. Feel free to tell me that I'm a Bruins fan coping, as I'm sure Twitch chat has been this entire damn time. But anyway, I think I've ranted and raved enough. To sum this up, and people can go back and watch the VOD if they want. I don't know. I might throw this up on YouTube. But if I did, hello, YouTube. Congrats to the Florida Panthers. A tremendous, tremendous team. Awesome to see them win their first ever cup. Not much else to be said there. Obviously, I'm intrigued to see what happens for them this offseason. Like, do they manage to keep Sam Reinhart? I don't know. For the Edmonton Oilers, it's tough. It's very tough. But I'm sure the players in time will feel better about the fact that they pushed it to 7 and to within 1 goal as opposed to just getting swept. And then for the Bruins Sens trade, give it time. Give it time. You never know. Again, the Bruins drafted David Pastrnak with a 25th overall pick. Not every 25th overall pick. And here, you know what? That's actually the last thing we'll do. Let's look at the last 10 years of the draft. We'll actually start in 2013, right? Let's see. Who was picked around 25th? Okay, Michael McCarron, not so hot. Shea Theodore, though, immediately after that. Ryan Hartman. A little bit of a mixed bag, but there is a gem to be found there in Shea Theodore. 2014, David fucking Pastrnak. Jared McCann, the pick before him. Adrian Kempe was still in that first round. Again, you got some guys that didn't pan out, but that's the point. There are gems to find all throughout the draft, especially around the 25th overall pick. I mean, look at this. Look at this. So I really don't get the attitude of some people to be like, oh, 25th overall, that doesn't even mean much. Tage Thompson went 26th, for fuck's sake. You get the point? I think you do. Feel free to go look through other drafts as well to prove that point. Oh, look at that. Jake Ottinger was a 26th pick. You get the point. So give it time when it comes to trades like that. Per Craig Morgan, Alex Morello is stepping away from ownership. Jesus Christ, really? Hold on. Now, the rumors were out there, obviously, in the aftermath of the, in the aftermath of the auction being canceled. Bruins aren't exactly great at first-round picks. That's true-ish. But I'd rather have them take the chance. Is that absolutely confirmed, by the way? I'm looking for it right now. I'm looking for it. I mean, not that I don't trust Craig Morgan, because he's normally very on point. But this would be tremendous news. It's over, Alex. Oh, yeah, there it is. Shit. From Craig Morgan. Wow, this is fantastic news for Yotes fans. Just Coyote staff on Monday telling them they have no plans to further pursue arena options. And obviously throughout the history of the podcast, like we had Deke Slayer on the show quite a bit as well, twitch.tv/Deke Slayer, to talk about the Yotes. And the hope was this guy wasn't one of the biggest snake oil salesmen in the history of hockey. That is unfortunately what he turned out to be. Short term, it's like, oh shit, what's going to happen? Short term, long term, it's good that this guy is gone. It is. It's good that this guy is gone. I do think, like, obviously, it was pretty blatant at this point. There was going to be no shot of him securing that deal within 5 years. I do think with him gone, it might take up to 10, but I do think we'll see the Coyotes back. And thankfully, it won't be with this walking evidence that you don't have to be smart to be rich. Well, then why isn't everybody rich? You want to get into that conversation? I think I can show plenty of examples of not every rich person being incredibly smart. This is just great news for Coyotes fans then. Damn. Yeah. Read the Craig Morgan article. I won't go through all of it. Craig Morgan's fantastic. He's obviously done a lot of work with The Athletic as well. That is tremendous news for the Coyotes. Wow. So there you go. Good news. Good news for hockey. And Alex Merriwell is gone. There you go. That's a good way to move. Wow, he's actually gone. That's kind of crazy. Thank God, though. Thoughts on the wall number rumor. High. High for somebody who has played well when he's played, but really limited games. You know, I mean, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't bet on Joseph Wall, but woof, that'd be a lot of money so far. Anyway, the U-Tree video about Alex Merrill will be great. I agree. Anyway, good night.